What is going on, you guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this video we'll be looking at the very basics of FastAPI. So for those of you who don't know what FastAPI is, it's essentially a somewhat brand new modern web framework for building APIs with Python. And it's only for Python versions that are 3.7 and above. And here I'm just looking at the FastAPI documentation or the web page, which is, I'll add this link in the description so you guys can definitely check that out. But really we'll just be looking at how to get up and running with FastAPI. If you're new to it, if you're new to making web applications with Python, then this is a video for you, as we'll just be going over the essentials or the foundations of what it takes to build a API using FastAPI. Now for this video, we'll basically be creating a API, a very simple one, that makes use of the following HTTP methods. So there's the get method, which is basically getting data from some data source, whether it be a database, and we won't be making use of a database, we'll just be kind of mocking one using a Python dictionary. The post, which is creating or adding some data to the data source. And this is just a very brief overview of the four basic HTTP methods: get, post, update, and delete. Update is for basically updating a object or some piece of data in our data source. So for example, if you have a data source which is basically a list of people and you want to update the person Jack, then that's what update would do. And this is spelled wrong, so update. And then there is delete, which just deletes some piece of data in the data source. And that's essentially what we'll be doing in this video, and we'll do this using FastAPI. Now all of this code will be made available on GitHub, so I'll also drop the link for that in the description also too. So feel free to check that out and to see what the end result is if you don't feel like watching the entire video all the way through. But without further ado, let's get into the coding. So to get started, first we need to make the necessary installations. Now the first thing actually to do is to create our Python environment. So I'm going to do Python 3 and I use venv, so venv and then venv. Just give that a second. And now inside my directory where I'm going to be building this application, we have this venv file. Now in order to activate it, you do source venv bin and then activate. And then you should see something similar or something in your terminal to kind of tell you that you're now inside of this environment. Next, I'm just going to update my pip. So I'm just going to quickly do that because I think it's a bit out of date. Let's clear it. All right, so now we need to go ahead and install FastAPI. So to do that, you just type in pip. So again, I'm using pip for this, and then install and then FastAPI like so. And that will just download all the necessary dependencies. Now FastAPI makes use of two really cool packages, one being Pydantic and the other being Starlet. So Pydantic is going to be used for modeling our data, which you'll see later on, and Starlet is basically what FastAPI is built on top of when it comes to our web framework. Alright, and the final thing to install is the UV icon, or however you pronounce it, but this is just so we can run our web application. So pip install and then a UVI, if I can spell it, UVI corn, and then square bracket standard. And what I usually do is just wrap this in double quotes because this brackets can sometimes be a bit confusing for my command line. So I just put double quotes around this, works the same way, hit enter, and that will install everything that you need to basically have a web server up and running. And now let's just clear that. And I'm now going to head back into my terminal, into my text editor, which is VS Code. So I already had this directory already open, hence why it's already there. All right, so to begin with, first let's go ahead and create a new directory in here. So we'll say call this API. And inside that, I'm just going to turn this into a Python module, say underscore underscore init underscore underscore and then py, and just close that. And then finally to create our main.py file. Now this is where all of our code is going to exist. All right, so first we need to have a application up and running. Now with FastAPI, that's very, very simple. So we'll say from FastAPI, import FastAPI, like so. Then we just create our app. So I'm just going to name it app. You can name it whatever you want, and then just instantiate it or initialize it like so. All right, so that's our app up and running. We can now, if you want, if we open up our terminal and actually run this. So to do that, type in UV, you need to first go inside of the API directory where our code lives. And here you should see now the main.py. Let me zoom in a bit more here. And then type in UVI corn and then main :app -- reload. So this is essentially what you want. And then hit enter. And this reload basically just reloads the server every time we make changes. So hit enter on that. And you should get the following output. So the UVI corn running on this port, and yeah, a bunch of other pieces of information around it, the application starting up. And to quit it, you can just click Control C, or on Macs Control C. I think also on Windows it's a similar case. All right, so let's get our first endpoint up and running. So we'll say app.get. Now this will be a get HTTP method. We'll say /API/ and we'll say hello, like so, and then end it with a /. All right, so we need to have this as our decorator. So this is saying, okay, whatever method whatever function we're writing underneath this, that's going to be part of this get method. So here we'll just call it hello world, and then underneath that we'll just return a dictionary. Let me just shrink this a bit and zoom out. So return, and then we'll just say message hello world, like so. All right, so back into our terminal, let's run this application again. So again, UVI corn and main :app -- reload, hit enter. And now let's go ahead and check it out. So I'm going to go ahead and open this, and I'll open this in Chrome actually. Just copy this, and just here, just going to paste that in, hit enter, and we get detail not found. Okay, so one thing that's really cool with FastAPI is that you have this really nice, or two really nice UIs that come with FastAPI for you to interact with the endpoints that you build. So for this, I'm just going to go to this /redoc, and this is the first kind of cool endpoint sort of builder that shows up. The other one is docs, like so, not rocks, but docs. And this is the one that we'll use as you can interact with the API or with your endpoints like this. And already you see the fast endpoint already there. So our /API /hello, and it tells you what sort of method it is. So in this case, it's a get method. And when I say get method, I don't mean like a method in the sense of Python. I mean in the sense of HTTP. All right, then we have the option of trying it out. So you can click this try out button here, and then hit execute. And then below you'll see, you can see the curl command if you want to try it out via your command line. And you also see the URL it hits. So in this case, for port 8000 with the API endpoint that we defined. And then our response, which was exactly that. It was message and then hello world. All right, so that's pretty much our fast endpoint running. But now let's go ahead and add some meat to our API so it becomes a bit more interactive and a bit more useful. So the way I want to design this API is that it's going to be an API that lists courses in a school. So what I'm going to do is create a courses dictionary, and this is going to be like our mock database that will represent each course in this courses dictionary. So this 1 is going to represent an ID, much like in a database. And then we'll first have our key, which we'll call it course. In fact, better still, let's call this title. Now title will have, let's say, modern history. Then we'll give it a teacher. Let's say that teacher is Miss Doe. Then we'll have students, which will be a list of students, and we'll say the first one is Harry Potter. Then we'll have Frodo Baggins. And then finally, we'll just give it a level. So we'll say what sort of level is this course? Is it a beginner course or an advanced course? And we'll just say this one is an advanced one. All right, let's go ahead and add another one. Say this has an ID of 2. And here we'll say this course is mathematics. And the teacher is, let's say, Mr. Davies. And we'll have our students. And this is an array, and we'll say the first one is John Smith, and we'll add Bruce Lee in there as well. And we'll say the level for this is beginner. All right, so actually let's just add one more. Let's add one more advanced one. This will prove useful later on in this video. So course, we'll just say this is geography. Sorry if this is a bit repetitive, and it shouldn't be course, it's called title. So title here and title here. And then we have our teacher, and our teacher is Miss Apple. Students, a list of them, so we'll say Michael Jordan. And then let's say Bruce Lee is in this one as well. And then finally we'll say that this level is advanced. Alright, so just shrink this a bit. So right now we have 3 sort of objects inside our courses database. Modern history, we have the title, the teacher, the students, and each one has its ID. Alright, so let's build our first get API that uses this courses database. So again, we'll do app.get. Then we need to specify our URL. So we'll say API / and we'll say courses, like that, and then end it with a /. Next, we'll define the name of the function. So we'll say, and this needs a / at the beginning. So for the function, we'll have get courses. So something that just tells you what this endpoint is going to do. All right, and let's just close this like that. All right, now for the meat of this function, we'll basically just return courses like so, because courses is already a dictionary, and what's nice is with FastAPI you can more or less send dictionaries and they'll convert it into a JSON response, so something for HTTP to understand. Alright, so let's go back now to our Redux, and let's just refresh it. So make sure you hit that refresh button, and now we have this API courses get courses, and again it's a get HTTP method. Let's go ahead and try it out. So if you click try out and then execute, you then get back the same list that we created, the same basic dictionary of the courses, so with ID 1 and then the information about that course, ID 2, 3, etc. Alright, so that's our get list of courses. The next endpoint that we want to add is one that will retrieve a single entity or a single course in our database. So one that will return such as if we were to say, get me the course with the ID of 1, and it will return this. And then the same goes for 2 and 3. So for that, again, it will be a get endpoint, so app.get, and then /API/courses / and then here we put in our parameter. Now we'll just say course_ID, and then end that with a /. Underneath that, we'll just call it, instead of calling it get courses, we'll call it get course, as we'll only be returning 1. And let's just put pass here for a second. All right, so what we want is we want to get the course based on the ID that you put inside the API endpoint. So for example, the way it will look is if you did something like, let's just put a comment here and say if you did API/courses /1, then it will retrieve this modern history course. And if we were to put something like 2, it will then get back this one. So to do that, we'll just go ahead and write in the following. So we'll say return courses, and then we need this course ID. Now to get this course ID from our URL, we just have to write the same thing inside of our, as a parameter inside of our get course function. And then we have to specify what type it is. So we'll just say that's an integer. And then here we can just say something like courses and then course ID, and it will retrieve back that object. So let's go back to our Swagger UI or our FastAPI UI. And then here you'll see we've got a new /API courses and then this curly brackets course ID. Now if you expand it, you'll then see this field here. So something for the course ID, and it will tell us that it's an integer. So if we click try out and put in, let's say, the course ID 1, hit execute, and we get back modern history as our output. Let me just zoom in a bit as well. But we get here the course that has the ID of 1, so modern history, the teacher Miss Doe, the students, and the level. The next thing is if we were to do, let's say, 2, hit execute, we get back mathematics. If we do 3, we get back geography. However, if we did 4, given that we only have 3 in there, hit execute, we get back this error, which is a 500 internal server error. Now this doesn't help us really, like all it's doing is crashing the application. So if you go back to your terminal, you'll see that the entire application is crashed because of it. So we want to figure a way out to kind of make this error be a bit more friendlier and a bit more informative to the user of this API. So for that, what we'll do is create a try except block. And we know that this exception is a key error. So what we can say here is except and key error. And then underneath that, we want to raise a HTTP exception. So we want to say that it's an error, but it's a friendly error in the sense of, yeah, in this case, the course with the ID of, let's say, 4 does not exist. So we want to inform the user. So up here, we need to, where we have our imports, we need to import HTTP exception like so. And then down below, in our key error, in our exception, we can say raise, and then HTTP exception. And then inside of that, we can say that the status code is a 404, which basically means not found. And the detail is, we'll just put in a message. We'll say course with ID, and then course ID was not found, like so. All right, now if we go back, let's just refresh this and let's try it out again. So if we try it out with ID 4 and then execute, we get back error not found because it's a 404, and we get a nice message saying course with ID 4 was not found. So that's the way to kind of handle errors or handle errors in FastAPI. All right, so we have now our 2 endpoints for regarding our courses. So we have the get list, so this will return back all the courses, and then we have another one which is get a single course. Now the other thing I want to do is kind of change this get courses endpoint a little bit. So I want to be able to allow the API user to use query parameters. Now query parameters basically kind of like in this case, it will be like a filter. So what we could do is return a list of courses that allows the user to specify a query parameter. So for example, in our courses, we have this level advanced, or this levels. So level advanced, level beginner, and we want to also allow them to return a list based on the level that's specified. So for example, the way that will look is something like this. So let's go back to our get courses endpoint. So if you do something like /API/courses, and then here you may have something like level equals beginner, and that will return a list of all the beginner courses. So to do that, let's go ahead and first of all specify that we'll have a query parameter, so level, we'll call that level. And this, we also have to specify the type, and we want to use this thing called union. So we'll say from typing import union, and then down below we'll say level is a union. So a union basically means it's either one thing or another. So here it'll either be a string or it will be none, meaning that the user will be specifying a query parameter for level or they won't. And by default we'll say it's none. So when it's none, just return back the entire list. All right, then we'll say if level, so if the level has been specified, let's create a level courses list here. Then we'll say for index in courses.keys, so for each of the elements in our dictionary, if courses and then index and then level equals level, then we want to add the course to our level course list. So append, and we'll just say courses and then index. And then we can just say return level courses or level course. All right, so now let's go ahead and look at our endpoint. So if we refresh this, we now have this level field here. So that's for our parameters. Let's try it out. Let's try it and say beginner. If we execute that, we get back a list of all the beginner courses. So mathematics in this case. Now if we try something like advanced and hit execute, we get back a list of all the advanced courses, so geography and modern history. So what we're essentially doing is saying that, and you can see here that the request URL looks like this. So it has this question mark at the end and it says level equals advanced. So that's just saying, give me all the courses that have the level of advanced. If we set beginner, it will do the exact same, but just for beginner courses. So that's how you would add query parameters into your URLs with FastAPI. All right, so that's our get endpoints pretty much sorted out. The next one is our delete endpoint. So for deleting an endpoint, we'll again say, not deleting an endpoint, sorry, but for deleting a course, we'll do app.delete like so. And then here /API/courses again. And we also have to specify which course that we want to delete. So we have to say again, the course _ID. And then underneath this, we'll just call this delete course. And just like our get course method, because we're specifying a parameter here, so course ID, we also have to do the same thing here. So we'll say course _ID. All right, so for this, we also want to add a try catch, because it could be a try except, because it could be the case that there isn't, the user puts in an ID for a course that doesn't exist. So for that, we'll do the same thing. We'll say try. And then here we'll just say delete, so del, and then courses, and then course ID. The exception, however, is if this course ID does not exist. So we'll say key error here. And then here we'll just raise a not found error, just like we did before. Let's just copy that and then just paste it underneath like so. All right, so let's go ahead and try that out. So if I go back, refresh, we now have this new endpoint in red for deleting, or this new method. If we try it out, let's delete the first one. So course ID 1, execute, and we'll say course with ID 1 was not found. And why was that? So we should specify the int here. Maybe that does something. Let's refresh again. Try it out. Say 1. And we get back, yep, so it's deleted it, but it hasn't told us anything about its deletion. All we get back is response body null. And if we go back up to our get courses and then try it out here, we should see that the one with ID 1 is now gone, and we had that as being modern history, so it no longer exists. Another thing to point out is that if you refresh the server, or every time the server restarts, that the dictionary will go back to how we defined it originally, as it's not saved anywhere. It's only saved whilst the program is running without any refreshing. All right, so the next thing I want to add is just to give some more information about the deletion process. So right now the response is null, but it doesn't really say anything to, let's say you have a front-end application that communicates with this. It doesn't really tell the front end much. So to do that, we want to add like a status code, and to add a status code inside of our delete decorator, we can say here, we'll just say status code, and we can import the status code from FastAPI. I'll just import status like this, and here we can just say status code equals status dot HTTP, and we'll give it a no content. So now if we go back, let's refresh this again, let's close all of this, and here in our delete course, if we try it out, and let's say we tried to delete 1, execute, we get back a 204 here, and it's basically telling us that 204 is telling us that it's a successful response, and 204, when it comes to HTTP status codes, 204 means no content. So now we're giving our front end some information about what's just happened. All right, so that's our delete. Next, let's go ahead and add a endpoint that will allow us to create a course. Let me just zoom out a little bit. All right, so the first thing is that when it comes to creating or writing to or creating or updating, we need to let FastAPI know what the model of, or what the body of our request is going to look like. So in our case, when we want to create a course, it's going to have a title, which is going to be a string. It's going to have a teacher, which is going to be a string. It's going to have a student. It's going to have students, which is going to be a list of strings. And then it's also going to have a level, which is going to be a string. Now to do that, we have to model this somehow. And this is useful for when it comes to validating the body of our request. So what we're going to do is import something called Pydantic. And that was mentioned earlier in the beginning of this tutorial. And that will help us to model our data. We'll import this thing called base model. Now what base model will do is we're going to use that to create our course class, and it's just going to inherit from base model. Next, all we have to define is what a course is going to look like. So a course will have a title, and that will be a string. It will have a teacher, which is going to be represented as a string. It's going to have students, which is going to be a list of strings. And we can say that students is optional in this case. So here, let's go ahead and from typing also import optional here. And then down below, we can say that this here is also optional, meaning it's not required to have students. And then we'll set it to a default to an empty list. So if we do not add any students to it, it will default to an empty list. And then finally, we'll say level is a string. All right, so that's our kind of model for our body. And you'll see how this kind of unfolds in a second. So down below, let's go ahead and add another endpoint or method. And this will be to post. And again, we'll say /API/courses. And of course, we cannot add the ID here because the ID doesn't exist during the creation of before a course is created. So we'll just call this create course. And then let's just put path here. Now, in order for FastAPI to know about this course model that we defined here, we have to pass that in as a parameter. So to do that, all we have to do is say, we'll call this new course, and then the type of that is going to be course. All right, so now we can go ahead and say, first we need to create an ID for it. So to do that, we'll just say course ID equals, and then we'll get the maximum of courses dot keys, and then we'll just add 1 to it. So that way, all that does is takes all the IDs, finds a maximum one, and adds 1. So in this case, it would be 4 because we have only 3. And yeah, so that will be the course ID. Then we can go ahead and say courses, and then course ID is going to equal, and then we'll say create course. And the nice thing with Pydantic is that we can easily convert this into a dictionary. So we can say dot, and then we have, yeah, dot dict, like so. And then finally, we can just return that course and just say courses, and then course ID, like so. All right, so let's go ahead and try that out. So if I hit refresh, we now have this new method, this post one that's in green. And if I open this up, it tells us what the schema or the values are going to look like. So it's telling us that the title is going to be a string, the teacher is going to be a string, students is going to be a list, and levels is going to be a string. And that's all coming from our Pydantic model that we defined, and then we associated it using this new course here. And this should actually be new course and not that. So yeah, new course.dict. All right, so let's go ahead and try it out. So if I click try out, we have this request body where we have the title, and again it tells us what these types are. Let's add a new title. Let's say this is computer science. The teacher is, let's say, who would be a good teacher? Rhythmic. Students, let's say, we'll leave that empty. In fact, let's delete this and you'll see what happens. Level, we'll say beginner. Now if I click execute, we get back our response here. So we now have our new course. So the computer science teacher is rhythmic and the level is beginner. Now if I go back up to API courses and I click try out and execute, we now have, if you go down, you'll see that we now have a new course added to our courses dictionary with the ID of 4. All right, so, and you can see here that the students, given that we set the students to be, if we don't supply any information here, students will automatically or by default go and become a empty list. So that's basically how you create a create endpoint for in Pydantic. So we can also add a status code, just like we did with our delete, to kind of tell the front end that we've successfully created something. And here we'll just say status dot HTTP and then 201. 201 stands for created, so we'll also get back this piece of information as well. All right, the last one to add is the update course, and this is if you want to update the elements or the properties inside of a course. Now for that, let's go ahead now and create app.put, and this is what put does. It handles the updating, and we'll say that the API, the endpoint is API courses, and we have course ID. So we're saying here, update the course with the ID that has the ID of whatever we pass in here. And then here we'll say update course, and again we'll pass in updated course, so like this, so whatever we pass in the body, and this will be course. And then down below, let's go ahead and do try, and we first need to get the course. That's why we need this try except, because just in case the course with this whatever ID we pass in does not exist. And the last thing I'm forgetting is that we need to add course ID to our parameter, which is an integer, like so. And then, yep, here we can say courses, and then course ID, and then we'll say course, and then course like this, or title, sorry. So title equals updated course, and then title, course, and then teacher equals updated course dot teacher, course, and then we'll have students, and then updated course dot students, course, and then last one is level equals updated course dot level. And then finally we can say our except, which is again a key error just in case the course with the ID does not exist. And we'll just raise the same exception as we did earlier. So status code of 404, and we'll just have the message course with ID whatever was not found. Alright, so now we have our update method. So let's just go ahead and refresh all this. And you can see here we have this put, which is in the yellow. Let's go ahead and try it out. So if I click try out, and let's say we want to update the course with ID 2, so mathematics. So course ID 2, we'll say that this is now, call it further mathematics. The teacher is still Mr. Davies. Students are now Bruce Lee, Harry Potter, and Frodo Baggins. And the level we'll say is advanced. So now, and this should be further spelled correctly, so like this. Let me just zoom in a bit. And now if I click on execute, we get back a responsibility of null. So we didn't actually return anything back. We should go ahead and add that. But if I go up to our get courses endpoint, try it out, execute, we can see now that before it was mathematics, now it's further mathematics. We've got new students and the level is advanced. So one thing we should add is back here, we should go here and say return course, like so. And yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the basics of Pydantic. So we've covered over the get method, so how to get a list of objects, so in this case courses, how to get a single object, in this case a single course, how to create a course, how to update one, and also how to delete one. And we also looked at how you can handle exceptions in a nice way, along with how to deal with query parameters, such as our list, where we wanted to also add a filter for the level, so that way you can get back all the courses that have the level of beginner or advanced. But that pretty much sums up this video. All of this code will be made available on GitHub. Feel free to reach out. There's also a Discord link in the description, so feel free to join there. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And otherwise, stay healthy, stay safe, and I hope to see you in the next video.